Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for part like 3, I think, of a multi-part series that we got going on, where I'm going over the best cars from each decade, the top 15 cars from each decade. We've done the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. Now today it is the 90s. The top 15 cars from the 90s. I freaking love the 90s. 90s and early 2000s are the best for cars. They're just so good. But yeah, so it was kind of hard to choose between just 15, to be honest, but I picked the ones that I think are the most influential, and also just ones that I like the most too. If you want to support the channel any more than you already are, head on over to www.smoothstance.com/shop to pick yourself up a hat, shirt, or shorts. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Alright, so coming in at the number 15 spot is going to be the Miata. The Miata, specifically the NA Miata, because the NB did come out during the 90s, but the NA was the first one, and it just revolutionized the small sports car world, hands down. It only came with a 1.8 liter inline-4, making 135 horsepower, but it was rear-wheel drive and an absolute blast to drive. People commonly refer these things to like go-karts, and to be honest with you, it makes sense. They handle great. They aren't the fastest cars out there, obviously, not even close, but they make up for it in terms of just handling potential and the looks. They do look pretty good. They also are a huge inspiration for cars like the BRZ, the BMW Z3, even the Honda S2000. Many more took inspiration from the Miata, so big thanks. But the wonderful land of Germany has made some bangers over the years, and one of the big ones would be the BMW 850 CSI. This sports coupe from BMW was something literally unseen before. It was luxurious but quick, and it was a little tiny sports car. People just loved it. It makes sense. It's such a good car. It came with a massive 5.6 liter V12, and it made a ridiculous 372 horsepower while being rear-wheel drive once again. I mean, just those stats alone show you how incredible this freaking BMW was. There's still some BMWs that don't make that much power today. It was also beautiful on top of that, and sort of started like the whole luxury sports cars idea. Sure, it was not affordable at all, and it really still isn't that affordable anyways, but it doesn't need to be. It's worth the money. As we all know, the wonderful land of Japan kind of owned the 90s, though. They just kind of like were killing the game, and one incredible legend that came from it would be the Mitsubishi EVO. There was actually 6 generations of EVO built in the 90s, but they are all super special in their own way. They all came with the same motor though, a 2 liter turbocharged inline-4, making anywhere from 240 to 276 horsepower while being all-wheel drive. As we all know, EVOs are incredible cars and have a hold on the JDM world for years to come, and it's all thanks to what Mitsubishi did during the 90s. By the way, I did a whole freaking deep dive video on the Mitsubishi EVO, so if you want to see that, go check it out. But what about them American folks, huh? What were they doing during the 90s, huh? Huh, partner? Well, one big car was the Ford Escort RS Cosworth. Sure, this was not a muscle car, okay? There's actually no muscle cars on this list, but it was still incredible and honestly kind of being forgotten about recently when it absolutely does not deserve to be. It came with a 2 liter turbo inline-4, making 224 horsepower, and it was all-wheel drive as well, because this car was built to be in the rally racing world, and it did pretty damn good. Alright, pretty damn good. I can't say it like truly inspired any other cars or like started anything super special, but you could argue that it played a huge role in the Ford Focus RS production, and that's pretty respectful. It's kind of the grandfather to it. Next up is going to be the first supercar of this list, and it is the Jaguar XJ220, one of the most iconic supercars of all time, and one of the first to ever reach 200 miles per hour, which is insane, obviously. The car came with a 6.2 liter V12, making a ridiculous 500 horsepower, and it was rear-wheel drive, actually, which is an interesting choice, but most of these old supercars were still rear-wheel drive. It was not only incredible looking, but it was also incredibly fast. It was winning countless freaking races. It really cemented its name as something worth talking about, and it kind of looks like a catfish, to be honest, but a really good-looking, handsome, like David Hasselhoff of the catfish world. Finally, into the top 10 though, and number 10 is going to the freaking Mazda RX-7 FD3S. This one hurt me to only put at the number 10 spot because it's my personal favorite car ever built, hands down. but I can put my biases aside and I realize that it's not as legendary as the other cars on this list. Still is such a good car though. It came with a 1.3 liter twin turbocharged 3-rotor rotary engine, making a very nice 276 horsepower while being rear wheel drive. And if you don't know, that number was actually a little bit higher, but they had to say that it was only 276 horsepower because of something called the gentleman's agreement in Japan. But either way, this car was insanely well planted and still to this day is an amazing choice for a track car for how well it is at taking corners. It is incredible at cornering. It also was one of the last cars to ever be offered with a rotary engine, which sure, the rotary does suck, but it was a staple of automotive history, and that's cool, and it makes incredible noises. But let's take it back to the wonderful land of America, where I reside for a moment, to talk about the wonderful Dodge Viper GTS. Holy moly, bro, do I even have to explain to you why this car is legendary? I shouldn't. They had stripes on it, alright? That's enough right there to make it legendary. But if you want a little bit more, fine, alright? Here's an 8-liter V10 making 450 horsepower while being rear-wheel drive. This car was just an incredible race car who just completely started the whole Viper line, pretty much, in my opinion. I know that they had one generation before this, but it was a very flop of a car. And this is, in my opinion, probably the coolest car to ever come from America, period. They were insane, and the looks really backed it up, too. They looked incredible. They had a V10 under the hood. Incredible, incredible car. Next up is one of the world's first ever hypercars, actually, the wonderful Bugatti EB110. If you don't know about the EB110, you actually have to be living under a freaking rock, because it is insane. If you like the Veyron or you like the Chiron, then you can thank this car, because it started it all for them, alright? It came with a kind of small, actually, 3.5 liter quad turbo V12. Yes, it had 4 turbos on it, and it was a V12. That made it reach 553 horsepower. That was going to the rear wheels. That is scary to me. I don't know if it's just me, but that is a scary combination. But this car was an insane feat of engineering, and ever since then, Bugatti has made some of the world's most desired hypercars. I only didn't put it higher because it really isn't talked about as much as some of the other cars on this list, and I think public image matters a lot in the legendary status of a car. But in my opinion, it's a really legendary car. Speaking of public image, the next car, honestly, doesn't really get enough public image in my opinion either. It is the Acura or Honda NSX. Same car, just different names. But the NSX was a marvel when it came out. It proved that Honda was here to play, buddy. It is here to freaking cross you up and break your ankles, and it was awesome. It came with a 3.2 liter V6 making a nice 290 horsepower, and it was rear wheel drive. But most importantly, it was also mid-engined and looked like a damn Ferrari, but was coming from a small company called Honda, who made freaking economy cars. So who would have guessed it, huh? Who would have guessed it? On top of all that, it was a literal supercar from a company who had no business making supercars. Still to this day, it's the coolest car Honda, who's one of the biggest names out there, has ever made, in my opinion. But let's travel back to the comfortable world of very well-known supercar makers for a second to talk about Lamborghini with their Diablo. It was Lambo's next supercar after the launch of the Countach, and they had some big ol' shoes to fill. Them shoes were freaking clown shoes. But those shoes were too damn small for Lambo because they knocked it out of the park, buddy. It came with a 5.7 liter V12, making a ridiculous 550 horsepower while being rear-wheel drive, and it's still to this day one of the best-looking cars to ever exist, in my personal opinion. They just did something right in the freaking 90s, boys. I don't know what they were on, but we need it again. They need to go back on that substance that they were on in the 90s because they were killing it. This thing was an insane inspiration to millions of cars for years to come, and it took headlights from the Nissan 300ZX, so that's pretty cool. We are finally into the top 5 though, and this is where people are probably going to start to call me an idiot in the comments and tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about, but I don't care. Number 5 is the Nissan Skyline GTR R34. There is no other car in the world as controversial as the R34. Period. It came with a 2.6 liter twin turbocharged inline-6 making 276 horsepower, once again due to the gentleman's agreement, and it was all-wheel drive. Nowadays these things go for 6 figures all the time, and to be honest, they're getting close to 7 figures, and it makes sense. This car and one more that we haven't got to yet have sparked an entire generation of new car guys to love something a little bit different and to actually build a car as your own and not just buy it from factory and have a good car from factory. And I think it deserves number 5 for that. It is incredible. It is one of the best tuner cars of all time. Everybody knows about the R34 GTR at this point. Whether you hate it or like it, it doesn't matter. It has a legendary status to it. Number 4, however, is even crazier and honestly not talked about nearly as much as it should. It is the damn Mercedes CLK GTR. This is the coolest Mercedes of all time, hands down, and it's not even close. I do not care what you say. There's no Mercedes that comes anywhere within a fraction of how cool the CLK GTR was. This car was insane. It came with a 7.3-liter V12, making a staggering 655 horsepower while being rear-wheel drive still, which sounds like an incredibly deadly combo, yes, but this thing was freaking planted on the ground. It was a damn race car that the very fortunate could drive on the streets for some reason. And let me just make this clear. Most supercars today in 2022 aren't even making 600 horsepower. This thing is so fast that it would take off and fly into the woods on certain hills. I'm not joking. There are videos of this car literally just flying into the woods because it's that quick. It's just look at it too. Look at the car. It looks amazing. It's such a good car. Third place, however, bronze medal is going to go to the Ferrari F40. It's commonly referred to as Ferrari's best road car of all time, and it truly is hard to disagree with that. Still to this day, it looks modern, and that's damn near impossible to do 20 years after a launch. That's incredible, almost 30 now. It comes with a 2.9-liter twin-turbo V8, which is actually kind of small for some of the cars on this list, but it made 471 horsepower going to the rear wheels, and that number is once again a little bit small for the lineup that we have today, but don't let it fool you. It was, and still is, honestly, one of the best cars Ferrari has ever made. And since Ferrari is such a household name, it was hard not to put this car at the #1 spot, but I think the other two cars are just so much better than it. And on top of that, these cars are getting a little bit outplayed at this point. It's like everybody wants one and they're stupid money, but they are worth it. I mean, they're such a good car. Second place is probably going to make people like start a riot outside of my house, and I'm kind of worried about it, but I don't care, buddy. It is the Mark IV Supra Turbo. You knew it was coming. There's literally no other car in the world that gets so much hate but so much love at the same time as the Mark IV Supra. It's absolutely ridiculous. The car comes with a 3-liter twin turbocharged inline-6, making 276 horsepower due to the gentleman's agreement, and it was rear-wheel drive. The actual horsepower number was closer to 320 horsepower. They just had to follow rules, so they couldn't market it that high. But we all know the Supra, and we all have an opinion on the Supra. The engine truly is, and I don't care if you freaking, if you're a JDM hater, this is the truth. The engine is truly one of the best engines ever made back in the 90s when it came out. And sure, it doesn't really hold up that well today, but it still kind of does, man. Like, you still see plenty of people running 2JZs in 2022 and gapping people all the time. This thing was being used to gap Ferraris and Lambos all the time without even having to open the engine up, which is incredible. That's incredible. Yeah, it is overrated now, and I completely agree that it's overrated, but it still has its place in history as a legendary car. It is so legendary. Everyone knows the Mark IV Supra. Yes, you might hate the car. Doesn't matter. You still know it, and there's a reason why you know it. It's because it's good. First place, however, is arguably, in my personal opinion, the actual most legendary car of all time, period. It is the McLaren. It is the McLaren F1. The car is just unbelievable. It sucks for McLaren to have made this car in the freaking 90s, because those guys are going to have a hard time making a car that's this influential again. It's going to be like impossible for them to beat their own record. The car came with a 6.1-liter V12, making a ridiculous 618 horsepower going to the rear wheels. And the design, man. The design was freaking timeless. It dominated the competition too when talking about like the performance version, which was the F1 GTR, which, yes, there was an even faster version of the F1. It only had one seat for the driver, and it was the fastest car in the world for 15 years as well, reaching a top speed of 240 miles per hour back in 1998. The Veyron would be the first car to beat it, but I'm sorry, Veyron, you will never be even a fraction as cool as a damn McLaren F1. The McLaren F1 is an incredible car, way ahead of its time. Way ahead of its time. If that car came out today, like tomorrow, it would still be an incredible car. And it came out in 1998. But ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Tomorrow, I think we're doing the deep dive on the Scion TC. But next week, it's going to be obviously the 15 best cars from the 2000s. And then we're going to do it from the 2010s. We're not going to do it from the 2020s because obviously that's not over yet. So I don't want to do anything and not know what cars have come out during then. But I liked this series. It was a pretty fun little short little series, you know what I mean? So I like doing these shorter series, and I think this was a good one. So let me know if you got other series that you guys want to see. Let me know the content you want to see. Das Vidania. Have a nice night.